Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's Tuesday, August 9th, and this is the next iteration of Advocacy Insights. Today, we're going to be spending time talking about tips for effectively engaging your legislators. And while the PowerPoint comes up on the screen, while we get started, for the purpose of introduction, if you could just type your school district and the number of years you've been on your board in the chat box. That's a great way for us to know who is all here. Your name will automatically pop up with your chat, so no need to put that in the box. You know who I am, you know who Marissa is, but our newest team member that we want to introduce you to today is Mike Hoover. Sorry, Mike. I don't know what just happened there. Mike, do you want to take a second and just share a few words about who you are and what brought you to WSSDA?
Sure. My name is Mike Hoover. Hello, everybody. I've met some of you sort of at least by Zoom. And I am an attorney consultant lobbyist in Olympia. I'm actually in Chehalis, but I work out of Olympia, and I've been doing some version of this for about 25, it's almost going on 30 years, if you can believe it. I've worked for the Senate, the House, King County Council, Carl's Jr., not bragging, but I have. I'm trying to think. And I also was in the legislature in California. So I've been doing this a while, and I feel like I'm going to get it right this year. So that's very brief. It took longer to live it, but I can go on or I can stop there.
Well, Mike, I think you got it right by joining Team School Board. We're really excited to have you on the team. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Of course, as I mentioned, we're going to be spending this afternoon, the next hour, focused on tips for engaging with your legislators and understanding how you can best use this interim time to have strong, fruitful relationships once the legislative session starts back in January.
I'm going to kick off from here, and some of this we reviewed during our last Advocacy Insights webinar, but that was in June. So things have changed and numbers have changed. I think when we hosted that last one, it was 208 days would be the start of session. The countdown is in full effect, 152 days from today. We commence the 2023 legislative session. So in between now and then, you still have ample time to be doing very important advocacy work. Also, in between now and then, we have the WSSDA General Assembly, and we'll be talking with you more about that towards the end of today's webinar. You also are well aware and hopefully voted in your primaries for both House and Senate seats statewide. There were some surprising and some so not surprising results, and maybe Mike can field some questions about that. He's sort of our registered expert on all of these things. And then also just always remembering that while we think we know what might happen in the next legislative session, there's still a lot we don't know that will happen. There are consistent and constant emerging issues that we try to be responsive to with your support and involvement in our process. So we're excited for what's ahead. We have been having conversations with legislators over the interim. You hopefully have been having conversations with your legislators over the interim. Some of those legislators will change. There will be new ones that come in following the November election, but all of these conversations are important. Some of the things that we're learning include what they intend to bring forward for consideration in the 2023 legislative session. This is a short, not exhaustive list of some of the things we've heard from them around transportation funding, school construction, accountability of school districts implementing policies that have been enacted during past legislative sessions, conversations around school resource officers and just general safety of schools now that we're returning again to in-person, and school shootings are something that we need to continue to address, and how to protect our students and staff in such instances. Graduation pathways and mastery-based learning. We've seen policies year after year about this and will continue. Right to repair, which relates to your technology hardware, most specifically. Universal free school meals, made a lot of progress there, and still room to grow. Even year elections as it relates to school board elections. And then access for parents, families, and communities to decisions being made in the K-12 system. This PowerPoint presentation will be made available to you, and that last bullet is a live link that will take you to a document that gives you the current statute that addresses where community, family, parents have existing access and school districts have required interaction with those groups for decision-making processes. So that's a nice thing to have as you think about the future. A few other things just to note as we talk with our education colleagues. So these are folks at OSPI, the Superintendents Association, the Principals Association, the Para-Educators or the Professional Educator Standards Board, State Board of Education, so many other members of the education alphabet soup. Where we're seeing a lot of coherence is around these topics: transportation, special education, compensation of staff and regionalization, prototypical school funding model, and school construction. So hopefully we'll make some moves in all of those areas. Logan, I think you're up.
I am, and I just uploaded the PowerPoint document into the chat, so you have that in case you want to access these live links. A couple of other things you should note, again, all three of these are hyperlinks you can click on. Obviously, leg.wa.gov, that'll take you to all things Washington State Legislature. There's a great interview here that talks about just general legislative priorities and the focus for the interim, kind of like what Marissa was just mentioning. And then also this great resource called Teach with TVW. We'd encourage you to look into it. I think Mike might actually participate as a presenter in that program. It's really cool. It gives lobbyists a chance to connect with school classrooms to be able to share about the legislative process. Classrooms can track legislation throughout the session. It's a cool space, and all of those meetings, classroom interactions, and more are recorded there. There's also just some great tips and tricks videos in terms of how to navigate the legislative process and the legislature's website. So check out those links. One other thing we wanted to remind you about that we are sort of in the midst of is redistricting. And in case you are not familiar, following each US Census, each state is required to redraw the boundaries of all election districts to ensure equal district populations. And in Washington State, the Washington State Redistricting Commission did that at the end of 2021, and our legislature adopted new maps in February 2022. And what that means for you is that you may have new state legislators or congressional members, maybe. There's some links to the new maps. You can find out if your school district has been impacted. If it does impact you, you have new lawmakers that you should get to know, that you need to know. So you should absolutely reach out to them, let them know who you are, maybe invite them to your school or district to participate in your events. Let them know what it's like in your district and how their decisions in the legislative session impact you and your school district. And again, this is a great time to be letting them know if you have any budding priorities for the 2023 legislative session, just taking time to introduce yourself and build that relationship so that when the legislative session does start, you know who they are and they also know who you are. And on the next slide here, these are all links that will be important for you. That first one is most important. That is a link to the new district maps. So you can go check that out and see if your school district has moved. And then, of course, a link to the legislative roster so you can contact your new legislators if you have them. Same thing for Congress. You can contact your new member of Congress. And then also something that we don't have a whole lot of information guidance on, you should probably talk to your school district attorney as it relates to any local voter area boundaries that may have to change within your school district. We do have a webinar. That Word webinar is the live link that Abigail Westbrook, our Director of Policy and Legal Services, has recorded to help you understand that. Abigail is also happy to field any questions you might have about how that looks on the local level. But just wanted to remind you about redistricting.
Thanks, Logan. And I would just remind everybody, if you have a question, please go ahead and either type your question in the chat or put question in the chat, and we'll call on you to do a live question or comment. And I think that's particularly important to know as we pass the mic over to our consultant advocacy lead, Mike Hoover. He's got a lot of great information to share with you. We're so thrilled he's part of our team, and this is a great time for you to tap his brains for some important information. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I hope I can live up to those kind words. I at least appreciate them. I am Mike Hoover. I gave an introduction earlier. I've been doing this a while. I think of myself I'm a lawyer, but I'm basically a lobbyist at this point, or a public affairs consultant. And I am very transparent about how I go about this. And I'm going to actually tell you what I do. And it doesn't mean I always do each of these things I'm going to tell you perfectly, or I do them all the time. They're aspirational, but they're more or less what I do because they work. And legislation and the process is very complicated. People always get bogged down in it, but you don't need to. All you need to really do is know, just remember this part of it. All you need to know is, what's your bill? Where is it now? What needs to happen next? Who do you need to talk to make that happen? That's really it. That is honestly it. Now, there's a lot of details in there, but who do you need to talk to make the next step happen is kind of where we're at today. And that's where relationships come in. And it's good to start establishing relationships early. It's good to do it when the members are not under pressure. Some of the things I'm going to say, it acts like the members are maybe hasty or ill-prepared or, not paying attention. There's truth to that, but I don't mean to really give that impression. What I find is they're busy. They're very busy people going in a million different directions, especially during session, because session is always either 60 days or 105 days. So everything is compressed. So frequently when you meet with them, they will be very, very busy, but they do want to hear from you. And that starts, I think now, it starts in interim when they're not under the gun so much, when they're not quite so busy. I say they always want to hear from you. Do they always want to hear from me? Well, I like to think so, but they probably don't, because I'm just a paid advocate for them. But you are in their district. You are an issue expert. You are out in the field. They do want to hear from you. So give them a call. Honestly, if it's somebody new, if somebody just got elected or changed positions, that is a really nice way or a nice time to reintroduce yourself. If it's somebody that has been around for a while, good news, still a very good time to introduce yourself and get reacquainted with them while they're not under the gun. You can just get together with them and establish that, so that when later on, when we are busy, you already have that relationship and they know your number and you have their number and you can call them up. Right now is a great opportunity to listen to them and get intel from them. They always know stuff we don't know. They're in meetings. That's one of the wonderful things or strange things about Olympia is no matter who you are, no matter how great you are, you could be the lowliest intern, you could be the Speaker of the House. It doesn't matter. There will always be meetings you're not at. There will always be people that know things you don't know. And legislators are those people. They will tell you stuff if you listen. So just having coffee with them or getting together with them right now is a good time to just sort of pick their brain and say, hey, what do you think is going to happen in January? How do you see things shaping up? They will probably tell you, at least to the best of their ability. So it's an opportunity to get them talking and telling you what they see. And then you can also share whatever it is you want to talk about. It's an important way to get to know them and share that info. It really is. And it starts now. It really does. After the elections, things will start to get busier. Starting in November, things will get busier. There, we just went through the primary. In November, after the election, they will have a rush of activity, right, all the way through Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year. All these meetings have to be fit around that. They will do reorg and things like that. Reorg is where they assign committees, they pick leadership, they decide who's gonna get what offices. All that kind of stuff happens in November. So they're going to be busy. And in December is when people can start pre-filing bills. They can start actually dropping actual legislation to be introduced in January when it starts next year. So between now and then, what I like to do is suggest that you meet them. Your mission is twofold. One, to meet them, make sure you know who they are. And two, if there's something you want to talk about, just plant the seed now. I call it inquiry notice. I'm good with the meeting now if I go into it and all I get out of it later is the member goes, hey, I remember Mike Hoover saying something about this when it comes up later. I'll call him. That's it. That's actually mission accomplished for me. If they remember that I said something, it could be, maybe they didn't get all the details about special education. Maybe they didn't get all the details about transportation. Maybe they didn't get all the details about right to repair, but they remember you said something about it and they'll go, oh, I should call her up, see what's going on with that. That would be a great place to be. Can we please go to the next slide? I don't know. I don't think I can do that here. Okay. During session, I put this here, immediacy is everything because things move fast. This group may not need that, but I find some groups do. We used to do these call to action things. One of my clients is the Association of Counties. We do these call to action where it goes out and theoretically we should be covered because there's 39 counties. All the commissioners are there. Every legislator has at least one county. So if everybody makes a call, we contacted all the legislators. Guess how often that works? It almost never works because everybody assumes somebody else called or they think they can call later. I can't even tell you how many meetings I've gone to where they said, oh, I saw that call to action. I'm going to call her next week. And I say, okay, that's great. Also build a time machine because the bill already passed. So because it's immediacy, it really is. I'm not doing this just because I'm bored. Well, sometimes, but I'm not doing it because we're bored. We're doing it because we need you to act now. So ideally, I know you got other stuff going on, but if you get an email from somebody saying, hey, the call to action or whatever our equivalent is, if you could call now, that'd be great because I don't know how much time we'll have. We usually put in the message how much time we have, but we don't have a lot. So that's just kind of my plug for upcoming session. The other thing that's a little harder to do, but in a way is easier to do, you have to be cognizant of current events. We tend to get tunnel vision and focus on our issues, and we need to be aware that there's all this other stuff going on. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that our issues aren't the most important or aren't really important. I'm just saying that as a matter of timing, they may be on to other things. It's kind of nothing happened in a vacuum. It's not. It's important to know what's going on the floor so that if they have a big gun control bill, we're not trying to get meetings at least I'm not trying to get a meeting that day because I know that they're going to be doing that for 20 hours straight. And I also know that if they've had a contentious bill and they're fighting with each other, that maybe isn't the best time to ask for an amendment. That might not be the best time to try and ask if they want to meet with so-and-so and help you out on something. You don't necessarily have to be as aware of this as maybe I do, but you can always call me and ask what, if you're afraid, if you're like, hey, what's going on? Is this a good time to call so-and-so? And I'll be happy to tell you. It isn't a reason not to necessarily contact them if you have to, but it is a reason to know what you're walking into. Because if they just had a big fight and they lost, well, they're people. They're going to be in a bad mood, and you're going to walk right into that. I put in here that, I think I was kidding with my example that, we think we go in with one thing and they're spending 20 hours on a property rights derelict vessel thing. That's a real one, the derelict vessel one. If you want to, I don't know in the real world how controversial it is, but in Olympia, trying to make somebody pay for a derelict vessel, that's fighting words in Olympia. I don't even know where it goes, but it's a huge thing. It's been around since before I was born. My kids will probably deal with it. We haven't solved it yet, but every year it comes up and every year it takes a bunch of time. So that's why I picked that. So you at least want to know that that's going on before you walk into their office. Can we please go to the next slide? Okay, I already sort of said this, but this is a different version of it. The call never made always fails to persuade. I wanted that to rhyme better. It doesn't. It sort of works. The meter's a little off. But anyways, every call you don't make doesn't work. Or if you follow me on that, call them up. Call them up. There is no such thing as a bad call. Well, I've been on a few, but mostly there's no such thing as a bad call. Even if it doesn't go how you want, you will learn something. But most of the time, if you call them, they will listen to you. They, or at least their legislative assistant will. So it's good to place the call. But if you don't call, they don't know. And I guarantee you some of our, I don't want to say enemies, but some of our opposition, some of our friends on the other side, et cetera, they're calling. And numbers matter. If only one side is calling the office, and the member walks into her office and the LA says, hey, I'm getting slammed with calls on this derelict vessel thing that Hoover was talking about. they will be persuaded that, oh my gosh, this must be a big issue in the district. It might not be. It might only be 5 people that don't want to pay for their vessel calling. But if you don't call the other side, if we don't call and kind of balance that out, and we won't be calling about derelict vessels. If we're calling about derelict vessels, get back to me because I probably misled you. But we should be calling and making our point. So I'm going to get into some specific steps for this. I want to start out with sort of a disclaimer. You should be you, unless you're a horrible person, but you're not a horrible person. So be you. You've gotten this far. It works. You're elected officials. You're professional. You know what works for you. So if any of my tips in here don't work for you, don't do them. It's that simple. So with that kind of disclaimer, I'm going to start with something I'm not doing now, which is be brief. Be brief. Be short. Think about what you're going to say in advance and actually say what you want. And I say to be brief because you are one of probably 10, 20, 30 meetings sometimes that they have that day. You got to be brief. They don't have the attention. They don't have the time to spend on just your issue. You should practice in advance the 2 or 3 things you want to say and get them down. Now, I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little, but some people prepare a script in advance. I actually discourage that. And the reason I do is because when you have a script for what you're going to say, people tend to be more concerned with following the script than interacting with the person they're meeting with. And I just don't like that. I don't think that's very effective. The goal is not to get through the script. The goal is to interact with the person. Instead, have maybe the 2 or 3 or 5, whatever, it shouldn't be more than 5 probably, things you really want to get out, and make sure you say those, and make sure you also see how the member responds to it. Gauge what they're saying, ask questions of them, see how they're responding to it, and say what you want. I've been in a lot of meetings where I've left not knowing what the person that walked in the door wanted. I mean, they talked about derelict vessels, and maybe they even took 20 minutes. I don't know what they wanted. Did they want a bill? Did they want us do they want an appropriation to get rid of these vessels? I mean, I keep picking on the derelict vessels, but it's on my mind, I guess. In any case, say what you want. An example would be, there's a bill coming up on Tuesday. We'd really like you to adopt the amendment that we're proposing along with OSPI or whatever it is. Be very specific. I'm that specific when I can be. You can't always be that specific. Sometimes you have to back off and say, I don't know if there's an amendment, but without the amendment, we do not like this bill. With an amendment that we're working on, we're probably okay. And that's the best I can tell you. But at least the member will go, okay, I'll look for that. But you want to make sure that we're telling them what we want. I harp on this a little with some of the associations, such as yours, such as the Association of Counties, because we want to be so neutral. We want to be such straight shooters and so down the middle that we sometimes forget to say what we want. And I don't think the goal is to be neutral. The goal is to persuade, right? We can be objective and credible and share facts and still be persuasive. We want them to do something. Don't be shy about telling them what we want them to do, and then give them the reasons why we want them to do that, and why it's a good idea, et cetera, et cetera. And again, listen, always listen. They always know stuff you don't know. They always do. And get their advice. I do this all the time. And you'd be surprised how much this works. People would probably say, Mike, you're not a very good lobbyist. Well, maybe not, but I will ask them. I will say, Senator, I got this thing coming up. I know that one of your colleagues hates it. How can I get through this? And he will tell me. Really, but you don't ask, you don't get, as the saying goes. So I get their advice on all kinds of stuff, and it keeps them talking, and it also, if they're talking and giving me that advice, they're really processing the issue and they're retaining it a lot better, and that's a good thing. So it's kind of a twofer, but they really will tell you stuff. They will say, who you need to talk to. Let's go, if we go to the next slide, please. Who you need to talk to is so-and-so. And that gets to this multiplier effect. You can't be at every meeting, and you probably can't talk to every legislator. But if you talk to them and say, hey, I don't know if I can get a meeting with her, but Senator so-and-so had some concerns about this. So if you run this amendment for us, I don't know where she's going to go. If you're lucky, the member will say, oh, you know what? I'll talk to her in caucus. I think she'll be just fine with it. That's great. You can multiply the effect of your meetings if you're lucky. You can't always do it. Or if you can't get a meeting with somebody on your own, sometimes you can say, the senator will say, hey, I'll call her and tell her you're coming over. And then one meeting turns into 2 meetings, turns into 3 meetings. You can try to use one meeting to open the door for others. It actually works a lot. Is it nefarious? Is it manipulative? I don't really think so. It's just sort of leveraging one meeting into another and saying, hey, I know that your colleague didn't like this, but I haven't been able to get into her. Let me call her and see if she'll come down. Perfect. Doesn't always work, but often works. Be brief. I put this in here twice. Yeah, it's that important. You really need to be brief because you need to make sure that you've got your key points for them. Because if you can't be brief in your own kind of practicing in front of a mirror, you don't need to do that, but you get what I'm saying. If you can't do it there, you're not going to do it in the office with them. And do your chores is a thing I put here. And what I mean by that is if there's work, you do it. I do it. It doesn't have to be you. It can be me. We don't give the members work. Sometimes the members volunteer for work, but I try very hard not to assign any work because that will be a reason for them to say no. And I don't want to give them reasons to say no. Example would be if they say, I really like your bill, but I am concerned about this part. And then I would say, oh, what if we don't, that's a good point. We don't mind doing an amendment on that. What if I drafted an amendment for you? Would that be useful to you? Yeah, that'd be great, Mike. I do that work for lots of reasons. One, it saves them the time. 2, then I get to know what the amendment says. And 3, it's another opportunity to be in touch with them, right? So I do it. I get another follow-up by getting to present the amendment to them. Whereas now sometimes they'll say, you know what, I'm doing another amendment. I'll just throw it in there. That's fine. But to the extent you can, do the work for them. And that includes following up. If they say, well, I don't know about this, Representative so-and-so had a problem, you can say, hey, do you want me to follow up with him? Yeah, would you do that? Yes, because they're busy. It's another meeting for you. Say, I'll do this, or I'll go ask so-and-so and get back to you. Or they'll say, hey, how do the ports feel about this? I don't know as I sit here, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. I do that as opposed to making them make the phone call. Handouts, I have a whole presentation on this because you're all involved in education, so you probably have your own views on handouts. I'm only talking in the legislative arena. Handouts should be short. They should always be short. I'm going to say it again. They should always be short. And then you say, well, Mike, but I have all this data and I have all this stuff to say. No problem. Attach it to the short part. Put the short part and then put the data behind it. They may read it later. They may not. There's all kinds of different learners. You probably know that better than me. Some people like a ton of charts. Some people like 50 pages. Some people like a sentence. Some people like you to whisper in their ear. Probably don't do that. I think that's a whole other thing. But anyways, whatever works is what you got to do. And short always works, because short, they can always ask for more. But if you give them a big stack of papers, that's especially with all the other stuff they're going on, that's just another opportunity to go, well, I'll look at this never and put it to the side. So I like it to be short, a paragraph or 2. Actually, if you don't believe me, go pull up a bill report. Go pull up a House or Senate bill report. You will see a little box summarizing it. Now, I would never suggest that members only look at that box and then go vote, but maybe. Anyways, short is good. Weaknesses and problems that you have in your argument, if you're meeting with them, tell them. It doesn't have to be the first thing you say, but they're going to find out. Members don't like surprises. If we're doing something and OSPI hates it, for example, let's tell them, because probably OSPI is going to find out and tell them. Obviously, OSPI loves everything we do. That was hypothetical. But in any case, if we have a weakness or something, I always talk about it. And then I always talk about why I think we're right. They don't like this, but I think they'll be okay with an amendment. We're on different sides of this, but here's why I think we should go this way. Always better to do that. You don't want the member charging off and then getting blindsided. That's a bad thing. I think I'm at my final thing here, and then I can go to questions if you want. Personalization. I am not a fan of mass emails. I see them all the time. I know they have their time and place, but for persuading members, I like to personalize them. And that really means that sometimes I have to sit down and do 49 or 98 of them. I really don't have to do 49 or 98, but I do have to cut and paste 49 or 98 times. I don't have to do that too often because I'm not usually contacting all of them, but I do not like the mass emails because in my experience, they just tune them out. They just feel it's for somebody else and they won't look at it and they don't need to do it. But whereas if I can go, if I can do a short email to just a few key people, always works better, individual to each of them. Will they even look at that? Who knows? But I think I have found I have better success with that than just doing mass emails. So how am I doing on time?
You're doing great, Mike.
Okay.
There's a lot of information there. We do have a question in the chat, and this is a nice time to kind of pause because people will digest all the things they just learned while you answer this first question, and then I have a couple other things to add. So Kim from Fife asked about electronic versus paper and legislators' preference. So she's saying that they're asking for it to be sent to them electronically as opposed to in paper. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, that's changing. And I think the short answer is it's going all to electronic because there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because, quite frankly, members are getting more technically savvy. The Senate in particular tends to be a little bit behind the times with technology at times. But even they are sort of, you've seen how they vote, right? So they don't, it's all voice vote. So they're kind of in the past wanted all paper. Now they don't want that because it's hard to archive, and they have to start archiving materials. They didn't used to have to do that under the Public Records Act, but now they do. They have to be able to archive and produce public records. So that's really the reason they're asking for that and why they've tried to standardize it. I still will give members paper if I see them in person. A lot of times they will not take it, I have found. So that's okay because of that reason. They've been trained. Their training is too good. They've been told to get everything electronically. Some of them are okay with it, but always have it electronically as a backup for that reason. But I still hand it to them if they'll let me, if I'm there in person.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Good advice. While you all are thinking about other questions possibly to ask Mike, I just wanted to add a couple things in response to the great information that Mike just provided. To note the fact that you are the members and the drivers of WSSDA, right? Like you are WSSDA, which means that myself, Logan, and Mike all work for you. And so these are all great tips and certainly things that you can do for yourself, certainly when you're representing your district, but also know that we are in partnership with representing you doing these steps should you not have time or interest in doing them, right? So we also want you to feel empowered, capable, and confident in doing this kind of advocacy work as well, especially as it relates to building relationships and conversations in the interim. So again, just remember, if you're not in a space to do this during ledge session, you need some more help, don't feel like you have to take all this on your own. That's what the three of us are here for, is supporting you in doing this advocacy work, either in your place or on your behalf, or in partnership with you side by side. Those are all possibilities. Another thing to note is that your member adopted positions give the three of us, again, the information and tools to advocate on your behalf. And oftentimes during session, we will ask one or more of you to represent that member adopted position on behalf of WSSDA. So those requests come from us to you, and we will work again in partnership with you to develop a message on behalf of WSSDA, to provide testimony on behalf of WSSDA. If it's Day on the Hill in February, we're together representing WSSDA. But you also have the option to represent your own school district should your position be different from WSSDA's. So that is still an option. And in some cases during the legislative session, a bill will come up and we don't have a position on it, but your board has an opinion on it. You have the ability to go and present on behalf of your board without WSSDA being there. But if you're representing WSSDA, we do that in partnership together. So I'm going to take a pause there. Logan, have you been reading the questions and have anything to throw at Mike? here.
Yeah. So I'm gonna merge two into one. So it's a question from Carl Carey and then an add-on from Rebecca Stillings, and that is, how would you approach a legislator who is negative about public education and has maybe not returned an email or phone call to a certain member, when you try to reach out to them and do you focus on someone else? Do you ignore that person or do you keep in contact with them? And how do you improve those types of relationships?
I'll have to think on my feet here because I've never had a member oppose anything I've ever said. This happens, and I certainly don't advocate just having to be. I don't think anybody has to go in and get abused. I don't think anybody has to waste their time. The problem is it's hard to know. Well, maybe it's not. It can be. There's degrees of opposition. I hope you're all sitting down because in politics, I have found that sometimes people will say one thing and do another. So you have to sort of use a sliding scale. I have a different role, and I'm going to talk a little about that, but I'll talk about what I would do if I were you. I would try a few contacts, maybe a couple different ways, maybe a couple of emails, maybe a couple of phone calls. And if those go unreturned, then you're done, at least for the time being, because that's not being overlooked that way. It's probably being ignored. Could be for all kinds of reasons. Could be nobody saw it. But if you've done a few emails, if you've done a few phone calls over a period of time and they never get back to you, I'm not going to make you keep doing that. If there is somebody that is out there stirring the pot, stirring up trouble, etc., my own opinion, the way I behave, and in this organization, I would never do any of this without direction and permission, etc., etc. And I meet with them because I want to hear it from them, and I want them to tell me what they're thinking. And that gets back to sometimes sometimes people are posturing in public, but they're actually okay. I'm with an issue in private. I'm also trying to see if they are in good faith, if there is really something. I'll try to a way to work through this. If they give me the meeting, and we've had a bad relationship. I've never had a bad relationship with anybody, but if you did, the way I would do that is I actually address it head on and just say, I know there's been some issues on the past. I want to work through it. Tell me where you think we should start. This is your time every bit as much as mine. How can we start over and fix this? I actually just talk like that. It maybe sounds like a bad soap opera, but that's kind of how I talk to them. And that goes a long way. Now, if it doesn't go a long way, then I know I'm done anyways. I know I'm done. This person is poison for our issues. This person is hostile. This person is not going to be whatever I learned. But that's actually pretty rare. And I could name names I won't here, but there's people that bluster in public and then maybe are actually super nice in person. It also goes the other way too. So I don't know how helpful that is. But I guess what I would say is this, with Marissa and Logan's permission, if you are encountering something like that, why don't you regroup with us? Because those are very personality specific questions for members. And we probably could give you a read on what we should do next, if anything. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of what I'm thinking off the top of my head here.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Mike. Absolutely lean on us to help you navigate that. That's what we're here for. And it's one of the reasons why we're so excited to have Mike on our team, because he has deep and long relationships with legislators, both on the House and Senate R&D side. So we can work with him closely to navigate any of those kinds of challenges. Right, Mike?
We can. I got to tell you something that my grandma used to say years ago. I cleaned it up a little. Some people are jerks. Yeah. That's okay. They're there. The good news is, there's 147 of them. You can't win them all, but I try to have good relationships with as many as we can. And that's all you can do, And I always want to be the guy that tries. I always want to be the person that tries. I don't want them, whatever else, I don't want them ever to be able to go in committee or something and honestly say, well, I never even heard from WSDA on this. They're not going to be able to say that with a straight face while we're working on it. If they don't want to meet with me, fine, but they're not going to be able to say we didn't try.
That's great. Totally agree. Thank you so much, Mike. Great tips. Did we answer all the questions that were in the queue, Logan?
We did.
Mike will stay here with us, I hope, till the end. So you may think of another question you want to ask him, but we'll get to have Mike with us regularly now. So if you think of a question later, please don't hesitate to reach out. The one thing I just wanted to be sure to include sort of in response to one of the things he mentioned about action alerts. You may recall, if you were a subscriber to In Session, which is our weekly update during the legislative session, that especially towards the second half of session, we had an action alert in every single release. We put it at the very top of that release and asked for you to weigh in, sign in, make a phone call, sometimes even provided some specific guidance based on your member adopted positions on what to say. So again, just calling your attention to those really are urgent action alerts and we'll remind you this once session starts, but really do require immediacy, an urgent response to those requests. So with that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just going to add something else to that too. It's really early. You don't have to look at this right now, but you may want to. And if you do, thanks to Sean Duke, our communications and marketing officer, our Bill Watch sheet has been updated. There's a new look and feel. It has all of last year's bills in it. So it's not ready for 2023 just yet. But there is also an urgent action filter that you'll be able to apply to our Bill Watch list so that you can see bills in that way too. I dropped that link in the chat just in case you want to start poking around and maybe if you have any questions. Okay, so with that, we're going to transition, give you a quick update about General Assembly that's coming up soon, and then some other resources that we have for you. General Assembly, you have the handbook. It's been in your hands for over a week now. We hope you're looking through the proposals, talking through the handbook with your board. And as a reminder, that event is coming up on September 30th and October 1st. It is all virtual and all free. Board presidents and legislative representatives also have received an email in the past week about getting your school district credentials. If you don't have that email or need help with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, all things General Assembly, such as the handbook, the amendment window, know before you go information is all on our website at wasda.org/GA. I just wanted to give you that reminder and update about General Assembly. And then, of course, a timeline of what's going to happen between now and November when our priorities are adopted. Quick highlights: the amendment window for any proposals that you may want to submit an amendment to is coming up next week, August 15th through 19th. You can find all information and details about what that amendment process looks like on page 7 of the General Assembly Handbook. As a result of that amendment window, we're going to be releasing an updated version of the handbook posted to our website on September 1st. Of course, the event is going to happen September 30th. Following the event, you will have the opportunity, as per usual, to submit legislative position prioritization. And again, that prioritization process is available for any school board to participate in, regardless if they attended the General Assembly or not. So if you have friends at Assembly or not at Assembly, please make sure to communicate about the prioritization process. Our goal, both in Assembly attendance and prioritization, is all 295 school districts. Later in October, there's going to be a WSDA board approval of the legislative priorities, and then you will see them at a public release on November 2nd. They'll be ready to go for the legislative session. And then I'm going to pass it to Marissa to share about some of our resources.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to rush you there.
That's okay. That's okay. Actually, before we go to resources, I see there's some questions. from Kate about the credentials for General Assembly. Kate, that is basically the login that whomever is going to represent your board will use to participate in the assembly. By default, the communication about that was sent to board presidents and lead reps, but any school board member, one at a time, can participate in General Assembly, and that credential is shareable so long as only one of you is logged in at a time. All right, I think it's you now, Marissa.
Thanks, Logan. This is a standard slide in all of our presentations, just a reminder that the positions that WSSDA membership have already adopted are posted on our website. That's a good starting point for the conversations that you all are having around prioritization following General Assembly, just keeping in mind that that won't be a comprehensive list until after you have had the opportunity to vote, to debate on and vote on the position proposals. Logan, do you remember off the top of your head how many individual votes are coming at this point in time prior to us knowing the amendments to?
Yes, there are 70.
70. Okay. So just keep in mind that of those 70 include new permanent, new legislative position proposals, which may or may not pass, and then amendments to existing permanent and legislative positions, which means currently listed in this catalog may not be reflective of the position that actually passes General Assembly. But again, it's a very important starting point, because there are also a lot of positions that won't come to General Assembly at all, that are standing legislative positions and will be the same because they're not coming up for a vote in any way, shape, or form. So just a reminder that all of this is now available online, and you can search by word, whether that's a word within the title or a word within the position itself. So it's really much easier to navigate than a static PDF document, and you can download all the positions together in one.
Can I jump in and clarify one inaccurate statement that I made related to credentials for General Assembly? Those messages went to board presidents only. So if you have not seen that, check with your board president. Your board president will let us know whom to send the credentials to for your board. So talk to your board presidents.
Thanks, Logan. A few additional resources. It's not too early to subscribe to In Session now. It'll just put you in the listserv queue, and we will likely do a few pre-session previews based on information we have and can share prior to the legislative session. So please be sure to sign up for that if you haven't already. If you want to take a look at some of those in sessions from the last legislative session, just to kind of see what it looks like or what we were talking about in week one or what the end of session results might have been, all of that is posted on the past legislative updates link here. Good just to refresh our memory about where we landed. And then Logan already mentioned the Bill Watch, which will look different than it has in years past, and hopefully will answer questions that have come to you in past legislative sessions, like how likely is it to pass, which will be a subjective sort of perspective, but understand that you may be interested in knowing from our perspective if something's moving or not, and what positions we're using to weigh in. I see there are a couple things in the chat. Logan, questions for me?
One quick question that has a really simple answer, and the question is, if I was subscribed to In Session last year, what happens? And the answer is you are still subscribed. That will carry over from year to year. No action needed on your part, Kim.
Great, thanks. I don't know if Logan has this able to upload into the chat, but if not, once I close this slide deck, I'll upload it into chat for you. We've got this really great document that we've been working on here in the interim, which basically should help you explain to legislators, should they ask, how member adopted positions are in fact adopted. So essentially how a proposal becomes a position and how that parallels the legislative process for how a bill becomes a law. What we wanted to show here is that truly the process for adopting positions for WSSDA is a democratic process that models and parallels that of the laws of our state. And the way that you have your voice be heard is showing up at General Assembly. And once the position is adopted by a quorum of the membership and a majority of those who are in attendance, they become a position of WSSDA. So our ongoing hope and plea to all 295 school districts is that a voting delegate for each school district is in attendance at the General Assembly in order to ensure that all school district voices are heard during that democratic process. This is also just a nice way to make sure legislators know that we don't just arbitrarily come up with our positions on various bills, or that you just make up your stance from year to year on various positions. That actually goes through a very rigorous process in order to be adopted by our body. Questions, Logan?
No questions, and I don't have that document to upload in the chat right now. However, Sean just informed me it'll be going up on wasda.org/GA in just a couple hours this afternoon. So check that website.
Great. So we have a few, well, not that much time left. Curious, we've been talking about what works for Mike, for Logan, for myself in terms of engaging and interacting with legislators. What could work for you? If you have any other tips, would love to hear about those. Maybe you could type an approach that you've used in the chat right now, or let us know that you have a story, example, or anecdote to share, and we could be sure maybe for our next webinar that we start with that. We really like to give the opportunity for you all to share things that have worked for you, because you are the ones who are on the ground in the legislative districts. And if it worked for you, it'll work for others. And so we want to be sure that you're sharing some of your strategies. Before we send you off, though, just a reminder about preparation for fall advocacy. As we always remind you, it's a year-round cycle, 365 days of advocacy. All day, every day. That's what we do. You can be identifying your top 10 legislative issues now, even absent of a complete position list, because you'll be able to match up some of your priorities with positions that will be adopted by the body. We already talked a little bit about reviewing the current list and aligning it to your interests. Share your priorities with us. We want to hear from you, and we would love, like what Mike was saying, is if you're having those conversations with your legislators now, because they'll remember that you brought up special education during the interim, which will undoubtedly be one of our priorities. I gotta believe it has been for last several years, along with transportation and school construction. Be sharing your stories now with legislators, so it's not a surprise, and they'll remember that you were talking about it already. Please come to General Assembly. Please continue building relationships with your legislators. We put a list here of last year's budget committees just as a reference. Logan, I feel strongly that we've got close relationships in existence with most of the education committee members on both the House and the Senate side. Some of that membership will change next year. We'll keep an eye on that, of course. An area for all of us to be growing in is on the budget committees. So if you have some good working relationships there, we would love to be able to collaborate with you on those. They're important for sure. And then just a reminder that OSPI has convened a advisory committee that has been collecting recommendations from various stakeholders about how to address the issues of compensation for your school staff. And those recommendations are almost final. In fact, their last meeting was this morning, and I think that report will be finalized. We'll be sure to disseminate it as soon as we have a copy. But inevitably, that will be an area of conversation for the legislative session, and know that staffing allocations and regionalization are big components of considerations in that document. I know that's important to you, Carl, Carrie, and for many others.